I call the meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission, September 3rd, 2025, to order. I'd like to welcome everybody, and can we establish a quorum?
Yes, good evening, everyone. Ms. Kirkner?
Here.
Mr. Kane?
Here.
Mr. Huff?
Here.
Mr. Robertson?
Here.
Mr. Swason?
Here.
Mr. Lester?
Here.
Mr. Smith?
Here.
Commissioner Gordon?
Here.
Secretary Daly?
Here.
Madam Chair, please let the record reflect that 8 members are present and we do have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Let's stand for the pledge, please.
Flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Has everybody had a chance to review the agenda? Are there any changes? No?
No.
Okay.
I'll make a motion that we approve the agenda for the September 3rd, 2025 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Administrative report, Secretary Daly.
I do not have anything tonight.
Anybody? No? Nobody?
Is that Miss Daly?
Okay. All right. Item number 6, concept site plan S250015 Fisher Amish School.
Good evening, Amy Barcroft. I'm here with the Bureau of Development Review to present this concept review. No action is required, but the staff does support that the Planning and Zoning Commission consider delegating final approval of this site plan to the chair. This project is located at 2444 North Old Bachman Valley Road in Westminster, Commissioner District 1. The title of the project is the Fisher Amish Schoolhouse. And we are located in between Maryland Route 97 and Route 27, sort of north of Westminster, between Manchester and Westminster. The subject property is a 109-acre parcel, which is in the agricultural zoning district. It is also a working farm under an ag preservation easement, which was placed on the property by the previous owners. The current site includes a house, barn, and outbuildings, and it's accessed by a 12-foot wide gravel driveway along North Old Bachman Valley Road. The property has some environmental features to include a small stream and woods, but there is no floodplain on site, and the stream is not affected by the proposed development. The adjoining properties in the area are agriculturally zoned. Several of them are in similar preservation easements with the county. Most are built with single-family dwellings and farms. In this area of the county, we are on private well and septic system and outside the growth and priority funding areas. The developer of this plan is proposing a 1-room Amish schoolhouse on a 1-acre lease area near the center of the property. The plan proposes 2 structures. The first is a 1,320 square foot school building. And the second structure is a 520 square foot cement block building for boys and girls toilets. I'm sorry, I thought I had another slide to show you of the elevations, but the smaller building for the toilet structures and the schoolhouse itself are both very similar floor plans and layouts to similar projects you've seen come before you with these small 1-room schoolhouses in the past few years. So very similar to previously approved projects. The height of the structure would be 19 feet, and that meets the height requirements found in the zoning code. The site plan shows access branching off that existing 12-foot wide gravel driveway. The driveway was the subject of an approved variance request, which was heard by the Board of Zoning Appeals. The school is a conditional use, so again, it went before the Board of Zoning Appeals in April for the overall use as a conditional use, and as well as the request to use the driveway as is, and both were approved by the Board of Zoning Appeals. No new signage, lighting, or kind of any major features are proposed on the site. One handicap parking space and ADA accessible paths are proposed to the bathroom structure. And the enrollment is similar to previous schoolhouse projects that you've reviewed, with about 35 students anticipated to enroll. And these students will be supervised by one teacher. There are no special event or assembly areas, and the students and staff will be dropped off either by buggy or van. There are no other vehicles that are intended to use this site throughout the day, and it's not open to the general public in any way. So in accordance with their model and operating procedures, the schoolhouse proposes just one parking space. The reason I review this is because our code places the determination of the total number of required parking spaces with the Planning and Zoning Commission. Our staff finds that the plan proposal for one parking space aligns with previously approved projects, but we would ask that you affirm that parking tabulation this evening or provide guidance if you'd like to see something different with the total number of parking. Landscape is not required for this project. Forest conservation is proposed with off-site banking. Stormwater management has been addressed by a grass swale proposed on site, and any discharge onto the property would be onto the leaser of the property, so no discharge agreement is required. Concept stormwater approval was given. This is outside of the Bureau of Utilities jurisdiction, but other agencies, including emergency services, site compliance, and the health department have approved this plan. Water resources, the grading department, and zoning have some minor comments that will be addressed on the final plan. Additionally, the engineer has submitted a variance request simply regarding the commercial entrance standards and bypass lane standards that would be typically required at the entrance onto North Old Bachman Valley Road. Site distance has already been achieved, and the requests for those two variances are being reviewed currently by our Bureau of Engineering with the Department of Public Works. This final site plan will be tested and reviewed for adequacy of public facilities in accordance with Chapter 155. Again, there is no action required by you this evening as this is a concept review, but we would ask that you consider delegating final approval to the chair due to the small scope of work of this project and the minimal impact to the surrounding area. I do have some photos of the site. You can see in the bottom the current existing entrance onto Old Bachman Valley Road, and that is facing the site. And then fenced off where there is currently a small trailer is the proposed location of that schoolhouse building and the separate toilet building. Please let me know if you have any other questions.
Yeah, I have a couple.
Sure.
It pertains to the Malf easement. It is it's a Maryland Ag Preservation easement.
Yes, sir.
Is there a letter in your file that allows for this?
I have met with the Ag Preservation staff and reviewed this plan with them both at the initial discussions and when the plan came in. I'm not sure that I have a letter to produce today, but that's certainly something I can look for and bring back.
I guess my question is, has it been approved by
Yes.
the Malf?
We have a letter from Malf.
Okay.
The only condition, I'm sorry, I'm Linda Alexander from CLSI. Malf approved this contingent on two items. Number one, that the county approved the site plan, whichever form of site plan it was. And number two, that the Board of Zoning Appeals approved the school. okay? The other condition on that, just so you know, Ralph, is if this school is decommissioned and it's no longer a school, that building goes to strictly being an ag building. It cannot be used for any type of commercial use. It can only be used as a farm building. That was another contingency of having it in a Malf easement.
So what's the trailer being used for now?
Right now, that's a temporary location for them to provide, for them to have schooling in it because they had to have their kids in school. Once the site plan is approved and the building is built, that trailer will be removed. It's there temporarily just for them to have school in.
So Malf was that lenient? to allow
This
this?
is the-
other thing, the other question I have, which pertains to the same thing. In my easement and every easement I've ever written, it talks about future dwellings or any sort of buildings on farms. And it says explicitly in the easement that you put these buildings where it least affects the farming or agricultural intent of the
Correct.
property. You mentioned it's right in the middle of the farm?
No, it is, I'm sorry, it sits next to, it's an acre of ground that was originally used for some grazing, and it sits up against a wooded area right along the existing farm entrance.
So then
I
is
just
there a
meant to say
payback?
it was central in the location of the, in other words, describing where the acre sat in the larger 190.
Yeah, it
Is
sits
there-
next to a wooded area.
Okay, so is there a survey description to exclude this from
No.
the easement?
No, it's covered by the easement. It's continued to be covered by the easement. And this is the third one that Malf has done like this. There are two others. There are two other schools in Carroll County right now. One of them is on a Malf
Well,
easement.
I know there are other schools.
And there
but I-
is another location, I think in Baltimore County or maybe Hartford County, that it's also on a Malf. It is an approved Malf use for these schools when they're considered, in this context, as far as there's no plumbing, there's no electric, it's an Amish school. It'll be, if it's decommissioned, it goes back to being a farm use. It's very strict contingency on these. They are required to be a certain distance from the existing house that's there, you know, there has to be within a certain acre of cartilage and stuff like that. All of this has been approved. And that was the first thing that we did on this property, is get Malf approval. Yep.
Boy, does that surprise me.
Ralph, what's MALF stand for, please?
I'm sorry?
Malf.
Maryland Ag Land Preservation Foundation.
Thank you.
And they've been very, very strict about allowing accessory dwellings or accessory buildings of any sort on easement properties. I mean, very, very strict about it.
Got it.
And I mean, this is the first one that I've encountered being on this commission. So apparently you have approved the other two.
I think.
Is that the
One of
case?
them is in Hereford, is that right?
Well,
Yeah.
let me rephrase that. The one that's off of Roop Road was done as a simplified site plan because the square footage for the disturbance was kept under 5,000 square feet. The other one is not on a Malf easement, it's on cross-section road. That was handled under a major site plan. The other ones that were on Malf easements are not in this county. Yeah.
Okay, I'm surprised about this. I know how hard it was to get anything done on a Malf easement that was anything other than an agricultural use. And especially when you're taking land from agriculture, extremely hard. So whatever you did, it's amazing. Can you?
Malf
comment on
has,
that? You're-
Malf has been doing this for many years in other counties.
For
And
your
Sa-
schools, right?
Yes,
Yes.
in St. Mary's County, they've done lots of them down there already.
And never have required a survey or a exclusion at all?
No.
They would prefer it not be excluded, because if the school was never there, then it continues with the Malf easement over
Well,
top of it
some
and goes
things are
back.
forever, and, you know, if that was a daycare center, it'd be different, right?
Yeah.
Or not?
Yeah.
I'm just asking these questions because I was involved in Malf for many, many years,
Okay.
and with the county easements, and with the rural legacy easements. And so, that's why I'm surprised that there's not a letter.
There is a letter,
I have a letter at
yes,
home.
and we supplied a letter to the
Hey,
county.
You have
I'm
a
just,
copy of that, don't you?
It's just not on me this evening.
Yeah.
I'll be happy to send that.
Okay.
I
And then,
think Ralph would like to see it.
Sure.
and then is the toilet facilities, are they monitored by the health department?
The septic
On a
permit's already
yearly-
been issued for this. There's privies, and it's been in the code that they're allowed to have privies. There's no pressurized water, so there's no water to the building. Water's provided by coolers and stuff like that. So because there's no pressurized water, privies are allowed under the COMAR regulations.
Okay, I'm learning about this. This is really new stuff from
You.
what we've
Yep.
been used to in this county with our rules and regulations
Yeah.
and protections that we have.
I think we saw something before about something similar.
Yes, you saw the one on Cross Section Road.
That was in
Well, that was before I was
2022.
on the board, I
Yeah.
guess.
September of 2022, that was reviewed here.
And when did
Okay.
groups go in?
Yeah.
2020?
I'm still confused on the privy. Is it, I mean, is it like a outhouse?
Is it septic or is it?
It's tanks. They're holding tanks underneath there that are pumped whenever they get full.
Okay.
So it would be, well, you don't have a lot of them in this state. It's very similar to what, it's not necessarily a full-blown outhouse, not with a hole in the ground. It's actually tanks with regular toilets and that type of stuff. Sanitation areas, all blocked in, airflow, handicap accessible, that type of thing.
Okay.
You'll see a lot of them up in Pennsylvania on a lot of the state game lands and stuff like that, but you don't see a lot of them down here.
Okay. Mike?
Well, I was going to ask about, but the road was approved, the gravel driveway for emergency access.
Yes, and Emergency Fire Protection has reviewed this site plan as well.
Okay. Good.
Pete? No. Pete?
No questions.
Okay, so the
Yeah.
variance request was, it has not been approved yet, they're just reviewing it?
So the Department of Public Works is still reviewing the requirement to upgrade the commercial entrance, to waive that requirement for curb and gutter and certain upgrades at the entrance, a bypass lane and that sort of thing. Tonight, again, we're here for concept review and just an affirmation of the parking as is with the handicap parking space, knowing that there's not a lot of trips generated to the site, and that pickup and drop off is by van. And it's not open for kind of like public events or sporting events as maybe a county school would be.
Is it open for school events? So, children's graduation, making things up where there might be need.
We don't have graduation parties.
We don't have graduation parties. Okay.
It's strictly for school, right?
We have a Christmas program every year
Right.
at the school, but in the spring, at the end of the term, have a school picnic, but else from that, it's for school.
So where do they park then? Just on the grass?
Yeah, if we come with horse and buggy, we can park on the grass, tie the horse to the fence.
Yeah, you don't need stone for horse and buggies.
Okay.
And just so you know, just because you didn't see the first one that went in, the one that's on Roops Mill and even the one that's on Cross Section, they all are on a stone driveway. This entrance on this particular site is actually larger, turning rise and that type of thing. It's been widened out more than those other entrances are. And there was no commercial entrances required for those two, as well as there was no bypass lanes required. So. And this portion of North Old Bachman Valley Road, from the time that you get onto this portion of the road until you get to New Bachman Valley Road is all ag preservation land. It's all mouth
I'm
land.
familiar.
Yep. So there's not a whole lot of development that's happened in that area in the last 20 years, or even 30 years for that matter. So,
Yeah, I think our only comments were on the cross-section of road is having the place widen them with the corner a little bit, so if they did have to get an ambulance in there or a fire
Yeah.
truck or something, that
which
was,
is why this one was widened out some. Mhm.
so I think that's about all we did.
Any thoughts?
Well, I think, since we've seen similar, very similar before, I think that we should delegate authority for final approval to the chair. so that you folks don't have to come in and out of here. Seems pretty simplistic, different, simplistic, simple seems better. Makes it streamlined, that's for sure.
Yep.
So I'd like to make a motion that we do, submit final approval to the chair
I'll second that.
and then keep it moving along.
Okay. All in favor?
And we're going to need a roll call vote on
Oh,
this one,
yes.
sorry.
There you go, sorry.
Mr. Huff,
Yes.
Mr. Kane,
Yes.
Mr. Lester,
Yes.
Mr. Robertson,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Swason,
Yes.
Mr. Gordon.
Abstain?
Madam Chair, let the record reflect we have 6 yeas and 1 abstain.
Okay. Thank you. All right, good luck to you.
Thank you. And just one question, if there's any direction or changes you'd like to see to the parking before we ask for a final plan submittal, or things as is, comfort level of yours?
Yeah, we're fine.
We're fine.
Yeah.
Richard
Yeah.
said we're fine.
Nothing.
I'd like to see a little more, but we're fine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, any public comment?
I don't think there's any.
Seeing no public. All right. Okay. We are moving along to Mr. Hine, adequate public facilities ordinance.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening.
Let me delicately. All right. Good evening. So before I get into adequate public facilities, I did want to circle back just for a minute to solar. When we one of our previous discussions, there were some questions that that you all had, and I do have information regarding those questions. So I just wanted to for your own to close the loop, I wanted to go through those real quick. One of the questions was how many acres of farmland have been preserved in the priority preservation area. And so currently the county has 51,059 acres preserved in the PPA. That leaves 41,850 unpreserved. In terms of the solar code that the state has passed, I think we talked about the fact that there are some other counties that are asking the question of that area. If 5% is covered in solar, then the county can prohibit larger solar facilities there. And the question that other counties have asked is that preserved or unpreserved or that sort of thing, or is it the total area? The state very well may address that in this coming spring's legislative session and further clarify that. But what it would mean for Carroll County is that if we were just looking at the 41,850 unpreserved and then the 5%, we would still be looking at over 2,000 acres that would need to be covered in solar before we could then start prohibiting certain projects. So it's still a very large number that, we will certainly track it, and if we ever got to that far, we could, state law would allow us to prohibit some larger projects, but it wasn't something that we felt needed to be codified in our code. So, any questions on that? Another question was, what does the state tax for solar development? So my understanding is that the state defines the use and tax rate based upon the largest use as a percentage of the property. So if it's predominantly agriculture, then it's based on the productivity of the land, not the market value. If it's predominantly industrial, then it's based on the full market value. And the tax is based on assessment, which includes both real property and personal property. So the tax would include the value of the solar panels that are on the property. And then the last question was, can the solar panels affect radio signals? And my research, internet research on this was that yes, electromagnetic interference can potentially interfere with signals, but this is regulated by the Federal Communications Commission that requires electronic devices comply with rules limiting unintentional emissions. And so if there are issues, they should be addressed by filing a complaint with the FCC. So in your area, Mr. Robertson, if you are experiencing some sort of electromagnetic bleed over that's affecting radio signals, that's something that you could reach out to the FCC and they would check and make sure that whatever's there is in compliance.
Okay, so just to close the loop on some of those breadcrumbs that you've laid out, which was great. One of the things we were talking about was there a way to assess, from a property value standpoint, a tax on solar that would maybe either slow it down or discourage some of this type of development, if that's what the leadership of the county wanted to do. So, but that's not us. We don't do that.
Right.
But we're just closing the loop on this as a discussion for us, right?
Yes.
Cool. All right.
And as far as, and so there are other jurisdictions that I'm aware of that are looking to assess an additional fee or tax or something along those lines on solar development, and it may be in PPA areas or not, that additional fee would go towards land preservation. However, since we are not a charter county, we would need to get specific approval to create that additional tax.
Interesting.
And I'll-
Okay.
Delegation, right?
That's a correct understanding of that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Wow, that's a lot. All right.
Yeah.
That's good, though.
Chris, not to keep beating this dead horse, but I'm gonna. How is, if you have a 100-acre farm and no development has happened, no subdivision or anything, if you would put 30 acres of solar on it, how do you do the lot count as far as the rest of the farm? Does that solar account for anything other than a use on a remainder? Or does it count toward the total amount of lot rights? So if you take 30 acres off, you'd have 70 left. And do you do the lot count for the property, which is 1 per 20, the 2 off conveyances, on and on and on, and how?
Yeah,
How do you account for that?
So having that use on the property would not decrease the amount of yield for residential subdivision.
For the total 100 acres?
Correct. Yes, you would still have that 100 acres would be used for calculating your yield for
So
development.
we're allowing the cake and you can eat it too? In instances like this?
That doesn't, I'm gonna follow on this, that gross acreage, using gross acreage to compute the number of lots, I think we should consider something there, because you're changing. I think we should net out, if you're bring some solar in, you should net out that acreage before you can then subdivide it and come forward and ask for lots. I would think that would be a net number, not a gross number.
Well, the rewards are many here now,
Yeah,
the way we're looking at this, and that's why I wanted to ask that question.
it's a great question.
But
If we're moving forward with our master plan, maybe we better look at some of these things that's contrary to the intent on the ag zone. And to me, it's just adding more and adding more and adding more. The other question that needs to be addressed in the future, we don't have that answer here, and I don't think we can even advance it. But I'm gonna put it out there for somebody to think about. If you take 30 acres of solar off your property, I'm using 30 acres because that seems to be a max unit that all these letters I'm getting
Yes.
tells me as I'm gonna be a millionaire off of this thing. My question is, if I have a 100-acre farm, it's not subject to an easement now, and I take 30 acres of solar off of it, and I come into the Ag Preservation Department are they gonna then allow me to put the rest of it under an ag preservation easement? Would it be eligible for that? And if we are, then why in the world would we all be buying farms and putting solar on and then put them under easement?
Are they looking at solar as a permanent structures or temporary? And
Temporary.
That land
That's
is ruined
why
after it's on there.
it's,
Yeah, and
Temporary use.
And
Yeah.
and that's why you,
Yep.
and that's why you would use the gross and not the net. Okay.
I don't
hear-
wanna dig too deep here, Chris,
Yeah.
but we've gotta ask these questions.
Oh, no, very good
Because
question.
they're gonna come up,
Yeah.
and it would surprise me either way if I saw in some posting that we were gonna put a farm under easement and use taxpayers' money to put an easement on a property that has already been subject to a large solar installation. And I'm looking at this and saying, is a taxpayer of Carroll County or anywhere, should they be obligated to do this? And I have a whole half-hour talk I could give you on that one too, but I'm not going to. But these are the questions that I think we need to start to ask.
Great question.
We're just allowing and allowing and allowing as the state mandates all this stuff, and we're not reacting to it.
but
We're just finding out things as they come through, and it's nothing that you have or haven't done, Chris, or your department. I mean, you've done a yeoman's job of explaining this to us, and I really commend you for that. But for every question that's answered, I've got 10 more to ask about this.
No, but I think, to your point, Mr. Robertson, I think it's a fair question. When you're asking about whether or not we should consider taxpayer funding for those kind of situations, I think it's a very fair question. It's sort of like the whole situation where we can't tax industrial, commercial solar on ag properties. But yet, if you owned an ag property in certain types of businesses, say, for example, a winery, they're gonna take your tasting room and SDAT may change that to commercial.
Right.
But yet it's part of an agricultural venture. But yet they're not gonna tax it at an industrial rate for solar. It seems a little counterintuitive from a revenue standpoint. I'm not questioning the state of Maryland and how they approach that, but you do have to wonder why one is being sort of enacted in a variety of ways the last couple of years. And I know of a number of businesses, county and statewide, that have been dealing with that. But yet, on the other end, solar we're going to leave alone, which would be a huge revenue generator, not only for the counties, but also the state. So I think you have a fair point. I mean, I think it's definitely something, and I don't know if it's something that would come before this group, or maybe it's something for the Board of Commissioners to talk about, but I think you have a very valid question, because if we're going to invest taxpayer money into these properties, and yes, I understand it's temporary, but it's still, 20 years, Chris, if I'm not mistaken?
Yes,
Economic
it's
life
typical
is-
lifespan.
I mean, it's still 20 years. That's, it's 2 decades at a time. So that's a significant amount of time, in my opinion. And if we're going to do that to the taxpayers, I think it's something that, needs to be really thought out. I think you have a good point.
I mean, what I don't understand, it just, the whole thing just seems, from the state, just very hypocritical to me in a lot of standpoints. This gentleman I know, that he's basically literally right on the Baltimore County, Carroll County line, 50 acres. And it was, a farm that's been in the family forever and ever and ever. But because they back up to one of the streams that goes into the reservoir, MDE told them, oh, you can't have cows or anything else on the property anymore. But for sight lines, he said, fine, I'll put solar. So he put 15 acres of solar. Basically on the river, you dig it up, you know what I mean? Like, you dig it up and you run power lines and all the runoff and everything like that. And like I said, 20 years later, they got to dig it up. It's like, so how is one bad and you can't do it, which is farming? And it is a farm. It's been a working farm for over 100 years. But, because it's solar and it fits into maybe a narrative, it's okay and you can do that. So I don't know. It just seems just hypocritical to me, because you're just trying to push
I
something.
think as far as taxing, you probably need to find a delegate or a senator that's willing to kind of put a bill together and take it forward, because that's how you would get some type of action, whether it's up or down, but at least somebody would consider it.
So the county commissioners would do that. If, that's something that you may want to look at.
Yes.
As a commission.
And we have a joint meeting on the 11th, which is next Thursday, with the delegation. So there's a number of topics that we're going to be bringing up on that day, so.
Also,
So
it still
I-
annoys me that they call it farming. Sorry, that, it's not farming.
Yeah.
It's not farming, but that's a whole different thing, sorry.
Okay.
So, Mr. Robertson, I've made note of your questions, and I'll do a little bit more digging, and if I find any information, I will certainly bring that back.
You understand where
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
coming from? with this,
Absolutely.
Chris.
Yeah. So, adequate public facilities ordinance. So, last meeting, touched on it and introduced the idea. I'm going to go through a little bit of a refresher about what we're talking about, and then I've got some draft language to change. I apologize that I did not get this presentation to you previous. I've been working on it up until the last minute, so. Okay, so just as a reminder, the APFO process, we check the adequacy of various public facilities to support residential development. And there are 6 that we check: water, sewer, transportation or roads, police, fire and EMS, and schools. And we check those at various stages of the development process. So we check it at concept plan level, and that's pretty much advisory. We let the applicant know, we let you all know what the status is with those various facilities. At preliminary plan, if there are inadequacies, then the final plan needs to come back to you all, because at the preliminary, you would not approve it for APFO, and so it would need to come back to the full commission for final approval. We then have what I'm calling 2 checks or gateways to get through. Your final approval is the first check. And then for subdivision plats, there's a second check that those plats can't be recorded unless the mitigation is under construction and will be completed within 6 months. So again, that first check, which is your approval for subdivisions, there are 3 ways that the project can move forward. Either the relief facility is planned in the current 6-year CIP, or there's mitigation, something that addresses the inadequacy that's acceptable by the county, or the Board of County Commissioners determines that there's an exceptional circumstance. If it's a residential site plan, it can be approved if the construction if the CIP project is under construction and anticipated to be within 6 months of completion, again, or if there's mitigation, or if the county commissioners approve it. Check number 2 then is for subdivisions only. So the subdivision plat may be recorded if the relief facility in the CIP is under construction, anticipated within 6 months, mitigation, or the county commissioners. So as an example, Mineral Hill subdivision is an example of what went through this process, right? So the first check, you all approved it per Chapter 156 because the expansion of Freedom Elementary was in the CIP, right? But that project is a couple years in the future, and so the developer could not record those lots. So could not record them and then get his building permits and so on. So he was basically held in check for that second check. However, in this case, the developer went to the Board of County Commissioners, and the Board of County Commissioners agreed there was exceptional circumstance, and so he was able to get past check number 2 and record his lots, and those lots are currently under construction. So those are the 2 checks that we're talking about. So there are 2 items that we talked about last week of potential changes to the process that could help streamline this process from a development perspective. One is to reduce that to only 1 check. So in other words, that second check of not being able to record subdivision lots would go away. And there would only be the 1 check, which is for you all, that you would determine mitigation is appropriate and imminent, and then remove the restriction on recordation for subdivision plats. So that's one option that we talked about. The other option is to remove the restrictions on the tests that may be unreasonable for a developer to influence. So there are certain facilities that I think we can all agree would need to be addressed: water, sewer, and roads. The developer needs to address those issues, right? The development should not move forward unless those items are adequate. However, there are things like schools, police, and fire and EMS that a developer really cannot influence. In other jurisdictions where there are maybe are a subdivision of 1,000 some homes where there's going to be need for a new school or something like that, the economies of scale are such that maybe a developer is going to build a new school or at least donate the property for a new school and that sort of thing. We're not seeing that kind of development here in Carroll County. So really schools, police, and fire and EMS, a developer really does not have much control over those adequacies or inadequacies. So the question, yes?
Question I also have is schools. I mean, the county doesn't have any influence over that. It's all up to the school board
Yes,
to make that change, and we have no influence over that.
correct.
So what happens if someone builds a development, a school's really overcrowded, but yet they're still not gonna rezone because it's not rezone, it's redistrict.
Yes.
So is there any way that we can influence the school board to make changes that, I mean, that's the problem.
That, yes.
Because, I
You're
mean, the
correct.
Freedom area has plenty of room to grow, but
Mhm.
the school system's at capacity.
Yeah.
And if the school board doesn't do anything about it, there's nothing we're ever gonna do to fix those schools in that area.
You are absolutely correct.
Correct.
And so the question then really, and I think what the question that was raised by the Board of County Commissioners was, the developer can't influence that. So does it make sense to hold up a developer from moving forward with a project on something that they can't influence? It's an excellent question, and I think is going to be the primary discussion behind making these changes to the APFO.
If I remember correctly, Chris, and just for all of our knowledge, the agreement between the Board of County Commissioners and the school system, that's voluntary, correct? When it comes to APFO regarding building, regarding the schools?
So the way it works is we provide information to the to CCPS. They use the information of developments in the pipeline and lots of other metrics to predict future capacity of the schools, and then they report back to us
Correct.
what those numbers look like. And from that, that's what we indicate whether a school is approaching inadequate or inadequate in the future.
But I guess to Mr. Huff's question and point, in theory, there's nothing stopping development if it were determined that it were to go forward from the school side. They don't have the authority to control that. Not that I'm suggesting we're going to change that,
Right.
which is,
Yes.
okay.
Yep. Yeah, so it's really a partnership, right? So the county, through you all, APFOs, through the county commissioners and so on, control the development side of the equation. The CCPS manages the districting of the schools and the capacity of the schools and so on. There is not a lot of influence back and forth. So it's really a partnership there. So the concept that we've thrown up here is that we would remove the restrictions on schools, police, fire, and EMS. Now, they would still be tested, and so they would be for your awareness, but they would not be the grounds for prohibiting a project from moving forward. We would still document them for the concurrency management report aspect of this code, which is the annual report that we bring to the Board of County Commissioners that indicates from a county-wide perspective what schools are approaching inadequate, and so on, as well as fire and EMS, police, all the various things that we test for. So that would help the Board of County Commissioners make decisions on the CIP program, if there's anything that could be addressed. But we would remove it from the APFO for development.
So, I mean, Chris, what we're saying here is we would approve development regardless of whether or not we had the finances to expand facilities and, or even the willingness. You know, we've got the money, we just don't want to do that. You know, for whatever reason, you know, the leadership's decided we're going to spend our money elsewhere. We're not going to expand the school system. We're not going to expand water, sewer. I mean, this, am I wrong? But this doesn't, this sounds like a mess. And I'm for growth. I don't want to, you know, I'm just, whatever. You know, help me out here. I mean, what does this not sound like? I mean, we can't mandate that the commissioners, you know, increase the budget and increase taxes to support this future development. And they don't want to increase taxes. So how do we do this? I mean, okay.
So just to clarify, so for things like water, sewer, and roads, where a development can influence that.
It's basically schools and EMS and police.
And police.
Fire.
Yep, yeah.
Yeah.
And again, just to clarify, I don't know that staff is making any recommendation on these.
Okay.
Right? These are purely options being thrown out there for consideration. And however, whatever direction you all would like to make a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners, these were the two options that seemed to achieve what we were directed to consider. So it's for discussion. And
is it? Is it not the case that we could say, okay, we'll approve this, but in that this piece of land is in, let's say, the Freedom Elementary area, there's no capacity in that school, we would approve this provided that the Carroll County Public School System put this property in the Eldersburg Elementary School where there is space. There is a capacity. I don't know. I'm making this up.
From a legal perspective on that one, we cannot tell the developer that you have to get a third party to agree to something to make it a requirement. It would be an agreement between us and the developer only. We can't, because the public school system is a third party, so we can't tell the developer you must do something with a third party.
It's from the developer perspective. I'm entering, you know, we go to one check or whatever. It's buyer beware. If you're the developer, because the school, we're good with it. We do your plat, recordation, do all that kind of stuff, blah, blah, blah. Knowing that right now the school is inadequate or whatever, and knowing that for that to change, the school board has to do something. So it's buyer beware. So why would a developer invest in that? They won't.
Because people are desperate for housing.
People are desperate for housing, but they can't be built because the schools are wedged and stuck. So does the school, and I'm probably, whatever. Does the school board understand how much of the county tax revenue goes to support the school system? 48%, 46%, whatever, 50, almost
50-something.
50%? So if you get more building, more approval for, you know, homes and things like that, that's more revenue for the schools to do their, you know, whatever, their education of students and, you know, search for excellence, whatever you want to call it. And it just seems to me that there's no desire from their part to do any of that.
Can you re-explain that second option again?
yes, so currently with the APFO ordinance, there are the 6 facilities that we check for. And so when it comes before you all, we provide a report to indicate whether any of those 6 are either approaching inadequate or inadequate. And so if there is no mitigation on the horizon, you all can deny the project from a Chapter 156 perspective, right? What this is proposing is that we would only look from a water, sewer, and roads perspective that those have been addressed. That either the mitigation is being done as part of the development project, or there's something in the CIP that's addressing those issues. But for schools, fire, EMS, and police, those would be advisory. And we would let you know that schools in this area are approaching inadequate or inadequate, but they would not be grounds for you to prohibit approval of the subdivision.
But a building permit issuance, is that separate from that?
Yes. So, so currently there are the two checks, right? So the first check being your approval. Once a developer walks out of here with your approval, then they go and they record the subdivision, and they get their building permits, and they can build, right? What the first bullet up there would get rid of that second check. So basically, if you all would approve it, you're good to go, and there's mitigation on the horizon and so on. You're comfortable that by the time they get through the overall process of getting their grading permit, subdividing, start building, and so on, that you're pretty comfortable that whatever the issue is has been remedied, either by the developer or a CIP project or something along those lines. So that's the first bullet option, to get rid of the second check, that second prohibition. The second bullet would be just looking at those three facilities for testing. So these are not tied to each other, so you could make the recommendation that we do the first bullet only. You could make the recommendation we do the second bullet only, or you could do both of them. Any combination thereof, or none of them.
So the only problem I would see is if someone came in on a one-check system and got our approval, but then sat on the project for 10 or 15 years, and they're still approved because we approved it. That would be the only downside I would see to that.
Interesting.
And obviously, if we do the one check, they have to be approved for everything.
Interesting.
So I would think you would need to put a timeline after so many years, then they would have to have another check.
Yeah.
I will say some counties do have time limitations on them right now in their ordinances. The state legislation is actually looking at this issue right now. It's expected, there was a bill that came forth last year, did not make it through. The state is expected to bring it back again this year about this exact issue when things are approved, and then they sit for long periods of time. Goodness only knows what will happen once it gets back, but.
And I would say that currently someone could do that already, right? So if
They could record them and sit on them.
Exactly. So they're already
More
passing.
money out of their pocket to sit on.
Yes, it is.
You see a lot of extensions.
Yes.
My question is, are we doing a service or a disservice to both parties here?
Yeah.
The developer and the community at large? In other words, there's got to be oversight somewhere. So we put all this oversight in, including EMS, schools, and police, okay? There was a reason for that, and that was so that the community felt like they were not gonna be overburdened with something that they couldn't afford or could foreseeable down the road. So I think we are sitting up here as oversight for all those things that was done to look at this. So I'm kind of have mixed emotions about this, Chris. I can understand the streamlining on one part, but are we really doing a service to the developer, allowing them to kind of hang out on their own as far as EMS and everything else, and the community at large? Are we allowing them to hang out and just be in space? Are we going to have schools? Are we not? Are we going to have EMS? Or can we afford it? Is it going to be enough there or not? Well, when are we going to find out about all that? After the deed's done? So I'm really having mixed feelings about this whole deal here.
I am too, Ralph, but let me see if I can get to a positive point on this. And so Chris, correct me if I'm wrong. So we're sitting up here and we see the CIP and we see the capital improvements that are coming, that are budgeted, and we know how long it takes to get a shovel in the ground, grade the land. These houses are not going to be built for 14, 18 months at the same time. We've got school additions that are going to be built. We're going to turn you loose. We're going to approve this, knowing that this stuff is coming. That's the intent. Is that what we're hearing?
Yes.
Okay, so we got stuff going on concurrently, which is, we're overusing that word. Okay, so what is the best way to do that? Because the funny thing about this is I like the system we have, because there's kind of a checks and balance. At the same time, I hear what you're saying. If we as an authority, the Board of County Commissioners, they've approved the budget, we see the budget, we see, plans being drawn, the engineering's being done for roads and everything, whatever. So then we can approve it, knowing that these houses are not gonna arrive for 12 to 14 months. Okay, so I'm warm to that, but I still like the checks and balances on it for the community, because I don't want to put, whatever.
Well, it costs for a developer.
That's right.
I mean.
Yeah, because again, it's not fair to him. Okay, so he's got an acquisition development loan, the clock's ticking, he's paying interest. We need to let him roll. I mean, once we prove it, let's let him rock and roll. I'm kind of cool to that, but I still like the checks and balances. So how do we get that outcome? If we know that the CIP and stuff is coming, it's been approved. How do we get that outcome without losing all the checks and balances?
So did the commissioners, did they ask us to look at this to see what might be best practice?
Yes, so the scope of what they asked us to look at was specifically for what are the barriers to a developer if it's determined that there's an inadequacy. So what happens when there's an inadequacy? And are there ways that we can streamline that process or remove some of those barriers if they're not needed anymore? So basically, we're at the end of the process, and we've got these two checks, and the options are basically that everything's adequate, or there's mitigation that's acceptable, or the Board of County Commissioners. There's always that kind of get out of jail free card, as it were, that they can override and say there's an exceptional circumstance. So that's the current system.
And the truth is I don't like that either, because that puts them in a bad spot, right? Because that makes them, golly Moses, we know because they want development, they want growth, but then they can't be arbitrary, right? Because they do it for one guy and they don't do it for the next. All of a sudden we get lawsuits. So that puts them in a really bad spot.
So there's only been a couple that we've said no to based on inadequacies, and the inadequacies mostly school. And I think the second was fire up in Linesboro or something like that. One,
But Mineral Hill was one that we said that's got a way to go.
They still rock and roll, yeah.
They
Right.
let it through.
I mean,
I think that was like 12 or 14 houses.
No, I think it's 12 new, 12 new lots or something like that. Yeah.
I mean, would there be a way for something like that, because we remove essentially schools from that, and I guess, again, we'd have to work with the school board to say, okay, so for this development to be able to be built, the kids that are here, this is, these are the schools they have to attend due to overcrowding at, so use Freedom Elementary, for example. But I know there's a school that's a couple miles down the road that's very under capacity versus over capacity, but, I mean.
Does the school ever refuse a student?
Not that I'm aware of.
So schools.
They're bad. Yeah.
No. Yeah. I'm not talking about those kind of students. But I'm just thinking, because I'm hearing both sides and I'm conflicted with this. It could be a way to force the issue of correcting the school, and I know I'm on record.
Liz,
It could,
you want to
yeah.
interject here?
I'll back off. But a school doesn't refuse a student. So if a family of, a community, couple homes, 10 homes are sold, and each of the households has 8 kids, and they're going to go to Freedom. Freedom wouldn't say, oh, you can't come in here because we're already at capacity, or, and all that kind of stuff.
No, but they're gonna run an extra bus to your house and you're gonna educate them.
Well, that might be part of it. But, so I guess my point is, it's not an obstacle. The school's not an obstacle,
I mean, there are other options, though. I mean, they can go to different districts if the family feels that bad about it.
Well,
Or if a school got overcrowded enough that they would force the school board by.
I didn't want to say that.
Well, but they can't, you can never force them, but you can put new people on the school board that understand they have to
The
redistrict
change
at
has
some
to
point.
happen to accommodate.
And currently, we can't do that, and the checks and balances keeps projects from not happening, because I'm looking at this, I guess you guys got it last month.
Yep.
Yeah.
That it shows that the Freedom area is the only area that has all the adequate facilities to handle more housing,
Curious
Right.
about-
Exception of
And the
the
water.
schools.
unlike every other
Right.
place in Carroll County.
I'm curious about the previous option that you had. You had several that went to the county commissioners, and they approved it. Did
Yeah,
they
that was,
say why they approved it?
so,
A reason to approve it?
so the code is very vague, and I think it's vague on purpose, is that the Board of County Commissioners have to determine that there's an exceptional circumstance related to that project. And in the discussion, I don't recall the specific as to if there was one particular item that they pointed to, but there was some question about, well, should there be more specificity to what that exceptional circumstance language in the code should be? But I think it's purposely vague in that it's up to the Board of County Commissioners to reason through and come up with a reason why there's something exceptional about that project. And it could be that there's a housing crisis going on right now, and we need more houses. It's the bar is set by the county commissioners as to what that reason is.
Do you remember what the issue was that caused a problem for them to still decide to do it? Was it fire protection?
No, it was school. No, it was Freedom
District.
Elementary. Yep, it was the capacity of Freedom Elementary. And so some of the reasoning through was, we're talking about 12 or 13 new homes. How many kids does that generate from a CCPS perspective? I think it's like 2.25 kids or something like that. And is that really tipping the balance? And there is a housing crisis, and there was all sort of that logic and discussion. But at the end of the day, they reasoned that, yeah, there was an exceptional circumstance to allow that developer to move forward.
But this doesn't happen that often.
It does not, no.
That's why you're trying to do this.
So if we moved forward with both of the bullets here, then schools would no longer be an issue that would hold up a developer. Well, I guess, I'm sorry, if we go with the second bullet, schools would no longer be, yeah.
He builds gets it through and builds the houses, and regardless of whether it's inadequate.
Yep.
He goes.
So if you moved forward with, say hypothetically, you all were comfortable with the first bullet, that keeps in place the test for all 6 of the facilities, right? So we would still test for schools and so on. It's just that your check would be the final check. And if everything is looking adequate at that point, and say in the example of Freedom Elementary, and the case for Mineral Hill, with your approval on this example, if we made that code change, there would be no second check. So basically, you all would be comfortable with the idea that there is a project in the CIP for Freedom Elementary it's a couple years out, but by the time the development is built and the kids are there and so on, that's being addressed. If we go with the first bullet, that second check would go away. So you all would be the one and only check there, right? The second bullet is a little bit more leaning to another direction, which would be that for whether it's 1 check or 2 checks, that schools, police, fire, and EMS would not be a prohibition on the developer moving forward. So you could do just the second bullet, in which case there would still be 2 checks, but we would eliminate schools, police, fire, and EMS as being checked at those first 2. So again, we can do any sort of combination. If you're not comfortable with either one, I'm fine with taking that recommendation back to the Board of County Commissioners. It's,
You might not know this, but what would the process be in, say, Anne Arundel County? You know, because just going down there and you just see houses literally going up everywhere on postage stamps. So, I mean, everybody, for example, has a shortage of police. I mean, not to compare, but, you know, what would their, I mean, do they have the same amount of checks as us? Because it seems like everybody goes there to build a house.
right, they do not. So when we looked at other jurisdictions, most jurisdictions have an APFO, and it's the checks occur during the development review process. So during the similar to you all, up to the point where a planning commission approves it. I do not recall seeing anybody that has that second check, that second prohibition on subdivision, or not prohibition, but just check at subdivision. But we do have information about other jurisdictions and what they test for and when. I don't have it in this slide deck.
Yeah, no, it's fine. It's just the fine line of we need more housing in Carroll County. So what do we do to attract people to build said housing in Carroll County?
Yeah.
Well,
But it was based on looking at those other jurisdictions that you come up with this.
Yes, the first bullet of reducing down to just 1 check was based on looking at other jurisdictions. Yeah.
So the second, the school, police, fire, and EMS becomes informational.
Yes, advisory.
Advisory, okay, advisory.
Yep. And again, it would be in the concurrency management report. So the Board of County Commissioners could see that this development has come through and so on. And based on the testing, whether it's schools or fire and EMS, they are, this particular district is approaching inadequacy or inadequate. And then the board certainly could address things like fire and EMS and could address fire and EMS. They would need to talk to the sheriff about police if that were an issue. And then they could talk to CCPS about school capacity.
So it comes down to the first one, just planning commission, no commissioners. The next one, planning commission, commissioners.
Yes. I think I follow what you said. Yes.
You know, the thing about this, and this, I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth here, but I like the checks and balances that we have. At the same time, and I know y'all, in your study groups, subcommittees, whatever we want to call them, y'all have probably discussed this too. If you ask the question, what can we do? What can we do to be better? You know, be careful the question you ask, because the answer to part of the response was, guys, your pain's in the tail to work with, you know, and then I'm on the economic development thing. I don't know what you guys heard. I'm sure the housing folks heard something similar. So, you know, I applaud you for bringing us an option, because again, I don't want to be a pain in the tail to work with. At the same, I do like our checks and balances. I like responsible growth. At the same time, I totally get this, and so I don't know. I don't know what I think about this as I sit here. I really don't, because I like the guardrails, but I also don't like the fact that, you know, we just seem to be chicken and egg all the time. Well, what comes first? You know, well, we got to have the school, we got to have the desks and the seats, the empty seats, before we can let these folks build. And so what we end up with is a bunch of over 55 housing. And, you know, Freedom District's going to turn into a retirement community, which is great, I guess, but not really, because, you know, I like having kids around. I don't know.
I mean,
It's not great if we're gonna try to grow our county.
That's right.
Then all we need after that is more hospitals, more retirement
Yes,
homes.
yep.
More medical facilities, more, that's what we get if
hear
we're
you.
gonna go to a retirement
Agreed.
county.
I don't want, yeah.
So, you know,
I still think for us to approve it, having, essentially water, sewer, roads, at least that part, in the CIP coming up, I mean, I still think that gives us maybe 1.5 checks, to a degree, because we're only removing some of the checks, schools, police, fire, EMS. It's just, again, it's just a catch-22. I agree, not just being like, oh, okay, come in, build whatever. Yeah, we don't have the roads to support it, this or that. But like we've been talking about, how do you get people to come and build things? Or like, Ralph, you've brought up numerous times about the houses that do seem to get built, are the $800,000-$900,000 houses. And if we are trying to attract, more of the starter homes.
And a lot of those are people that live in the community, so they're just upgrading where they are and still going to the same school, but then their homes are getting sold to people coming in. Commissioner Gordon?
Yes.
You're quiet.
I'm just listening, but I mean, I think the fascinating question, and I know I've said it a few times, I don't know if I've said it here, is, as a county, we've been around for 188 years. I don't think the question of what does Carroll County want to be when it grows up is even remotely germane to the conversation at this point. And I don't say that to be flippant. I think we need to figure out, what are we good at? What do we need to improve? What areas can we, whether it's agro-tourism, how do we bring in younger families? How do we maintain those individuals? Years ago when Random House was built, Bennett Cerf talked about the educational facilities and how you had a workforce here. We had a gentleman who I can't think of his name right now that was out at the community college for a meeting, I guess 6 or 8 months ago. And he talked about how we have a great opportunity workforce, but we have a challenge, which is no housing. So, we all know what those issues are. I guess the question is, how do we get there? And of course, not all of it's going to play nice within the same field, so to speak. And I don't know if anybody saw this today or not, but I'll just mention this for informational purposes. We don't need to get into this topic tonight, but Governor Moore signed an executive order to increase housing production and make housing more affordable across Maryland. I don't know if anybody saw that. And they're talking about state-owned land for more efficient development to reduce state permitting timelines and bring more homes to the market faster. And they talk about 96,000 unit shortage across the state. Well, obviously, we're somehow included within that 96. We know there's shortages. I mean, we see it whether it's interacting with people we know or posts on Facebook of people trying to find homes for young families or, new teachers, whatever it is. I mean, we all have the challenge here of figuring out the tough decisions.
I still.
But Tom, I want to ask you, with what Chris has put up here, does this, if we would take out the other three, the schools, and does that put more burden on the commissioners to decide who gets what, or is that our role here?
I think it's a case-by-case basis. I mean, the one example I know that we had come before us several months ago, the concern from the community, and I understand the concern, what was it, 11 houses, 14 houses, something of that?
12 or 13.
12 or
yes.
13. But the challenge was certain individuals, and I understand where they were coming from, and I get that. They were looking at those 12 houses, and they said, well, if each house has 2 kids, it's 24 houses, or 24 children, or it's however many per the total houses. And the school system had even said the number that they calculated at was very low. So that really wasn't a fundamental point of the argument, but it was definitely a concern for some of the people in that community. I think at the end of the day, I think between both the Board of Commissioners and this group, we all are here to make the tough decisions, and I think the question is, where do we want to go at the end of the day? How we get there is anybody's, debate and answer at this point. I think, but the challenge is, and we've talked about it quite a bit up here tonight, and this is not by any means pointing fingers at any group. We all work together because we're a community, but whether it's, the educational component, whether it's the builders, whether it's making sure we have proper fire EMS, all of those things have to be somehow mutually collaborating and working together, because if they're not, then we do have the shortfalls, whether it be funding coming in from building or industrial, commercial, or any of that. So, I mean, it's just a case of how do we get there?
seems like we've taken care of just about, I mean, a lot of those things. We look at the EMS now, what the county has done to enhance that. Same way with the sheriff's department. I mean, my goodness. District attorney, or the state's attorney's office, look what we've done with that. So we're addressing these problems as we move along. It now seems to me like we're just stuck on one major problem, and that's the schools, and how we're gonna handle that in the future. And,
Well, it's not the only problem.
no, it's,
I mean,
well, we got other ones than that.
I mean, in the
absolutely.
state of Maryland, the development cost per lot is
Yes.
absolutely insane compared
Yes.
to
Yep.
PA and especially like West Virginia.
Yep.
And that's the challenge.
Yeah.
Is how many houses, and we don't get these large developments because
No.
people, it's just an enormous figure, and they know they can't get enough out of the lot. The lot
Right.
yield will not pay for a large developer to come into our county very often to build these.
Right now,
It takes,
there's really only three.
I mean, it doesn't take
large-
tens of millions, it takes hundreds of millions to build a large development to get it all the way through, and it's just.
What do you need from us? I mean, are we making?
One of these two.
So, yeah, I mean, all this discussion, what I'll say is,
How about if we say this? How about if we say, we agree that we need to accept one of these two options and let it up to the commissioners?
whatever you would,
Pass the buck
whatever
right
you
down
would
to
like to
them.
further.
Or combine them?
Yeah, that's, yeah. What I will say is, and I've been thinking about it as you all have been talking about, we've been having these same discussions at a staff level. I mean, obviously there is not an easy solution. What we've talked about is that when the APFO was put together, we were at a very different development climate, and there was a reason why the APFO was developed, right? We're not in that development climate right now.
Right.
And so, is it reasonable? And we had, you may remember a couple months ago, we made some very minor changes to the APFO to simplify things a little bit. This would be a significant change. There's no doubt. We are in a different climate right now, but how is that climate going to change? I mean, there is definitely a pressure at the state level to increase housing production. There is, I'm spending a lot of time reviewing proposed legislation from Department of Housing and Community Development, from MACO, and so on, all being contemplated for next spring. That's going to be looking at housing. So there's stuff that's going to be coming. Now, is that going to open the taps wide open and we're going to be inundated? I don't know if that's possible. I mean, there are other things like septic tiers, which the county has not adopted. That's we're not going to have a lot of large lot. We can't have large subdivisions in the county because of that. How much land is still available in our municipalities for large subdivisions? I don't know if that we're going. I don't know. I struggle to see the tap turning that wide open. Right.
So Chris, let's take it to Development Armageddon for a moment.
Yeah.
Which would be a great problem to have, in a weird way. So we do this. The governor's off. There are the fewer guardrails. And Gibson comes in, says, "I want to build 90 homes." The development on Slacks, it goes from being over 55 to being just a normal, home community. And so all of a sudden we get a lot of stuff coming in. To date, we have been what I think is a fairly accommodating, and it's a good thing from a developer standpoint and from a certainty standpoint, is if you've brought something before us and then we change the code, but you've got it in process, we'll honor where you are, that sort of thing.
Yes.
But the truth is, as I understand it, if the shovel's not in the ground, we can call a halt. Is that right?
Yes. Now, I'm smiling because some of what's being contemplated is legislatively changing vesting for residential subdivision. So Maryland is a late vesting state, so codes can be changed right up until there's a shovel in the ground and you have all your approvals. But
thinking about
what's-
changing it.
But there's some contemplation for residential development of enforcing an early vestment. And now, how early in the process? The proposal that I'm reading says if they put in an application, and the application is complete, that there would be vesting.
I guess-
I wouldn't support that. I would want some sort of review done before vesting, but it's being contemplated.
I guess where I was headed is, so let's suppose we do this. And then everybody says, great, it's a gold rush, let's roll. And so, and then we realize we've bitten off more than we could chew. We could go back
Absolutely.
and put it back in and turn things off.
Absolutely.
That's not cool to the developers. I wouldn't like it, but that is where we are. Is that not right?
Yes, we could, the code can, the Board of County Commissioners could change the code at any time. And I think it's important that we keep those guardrails for things like water, sewer, and roads.
Yeah.
I mean, that to me is paramount. Those are health, safety, welfare sort of issues that you would want to keep those guardrails in place.
And last question, I think. So if we did this, how do moratoriums work? When somebody says, okay, everybody came all at once, and good for growth. How, if you wanted to put a moratorium, can people sue you and say you can't do that? I mean, what happens? Does that work? Does it not work?
You can.
You would
Yes.
have to do it for a specific reason, for a specific amount of time, and then have your remedy ready to go as soon as that time expired.
I mean, in doing this too, I guess to a certain degree could almost be like what we had talked about a while ago about solar, that we wanted to have some guardrails in, but we didn't want to make it so restrictive that basically the state just came in and said, well, we're undoing everything. So I guess at least if we were to do something like this, it's like, okay, well, we still have some guardrails, but they're not that restrictive that hopefully a developer wouldn't appeal to, the state again for them to, and especially with the executive order that was signed today for the state to come in and just say, well, we're completely undoing everything and now there's no guardrails. At least I guess that's what I would like to think or hope.
I have to tell you, I mean, and then when you put this up, I wasn't cool on this at all. I actually think I'm not ready to vote on this tonight. I kind of would want to sleep on it.
Sure.
But I think I might approve this darn thing just because the only thing we're seeing right now is over 55. And that's not solving a housing crisis at all. And I'm very frustrated with it. So I would be tempted to do this, but I would want to know what I would want to think. I would want us all thinking through what are the unintended consequences, and if we wanted to, how could we, and could we walk this back without getting our butts sued? I'm sorry, I don't mean to be, but that happens, right? I mean, because we saw that with the multi-story. We got sued as a county, and so if we wanted to walk it back, could we? And Elizabeth, we're going to need help, right? Because again, unintended consequences. That there are going to be some here.
Peter, I'd like to add to your confusion with just this. I would be more inclined to go forward with what you're proposing, Chris, on this, because of this. We keep worrying about schools, and we're worrying about schools. And if I recall, we just closed 2 really nice schools in this county that said we didn't need them. So why did we do that? So if we're so worried about schools and where we're going to put the children in these schools, why did we close 2 really good schools? So if we want to put the onus on the school board, let it be. Now maybe I don't know, maybe I'm going too far on a political statement or whatever. I don't think it is. Yeah. But you understand what I'm saying
I
here.
do, but Ralph, we
So
know,
I don't really.
90% of that was location, right?
Well, it was more than that.
Okay.
It was it was more than that, and we can talk about it forever, but it was done.
Yeah.
It was done at a lot of expense
Yeah.
to the county and
You're
the
not wrong.
taxpayer.
I agree totally with all of that.
So, if mistakes were made, they weren't made here.
No. And they weren't made by
And so-
those commissioners.
So I'm not as concerned about that one right there, Chris. EMS, man, they're gonna be taken care of no matter what. We're seeing that.
Well,
If they ask, we give.
Yeah.
And the same way with the sheriff's office. If they ask, we give. So I'm not worried about that one either. So I'm sitting here convincing myself, when I'm starting to go through all these arguments, I'm convincing myself that maybe we shouldn't be worried about those other three things. That's kind of where I'm not winding up here.
Okay,
I've already been convinced that this is fine,
yeah.
so.
we'll wait till next time.
Yeah.
I
So-
don't think,
We don't need any action tonight,
Okay.
so if we want to come back at the next meeting, what I will leave with, and I will get this sent to you, so you'll have more to chew on. I've got a couple other things. So the last slide here is actually, it's pretty simple if we wanted to implement both things. This is what the section for adequacy approval out of the code. And basically, we would add in the terms water, sewer, and I forgot to change it here, or road facility, and then strike the last part of this section. So it's actually a relatively easy change.
Yeah.
There are other aspects of the code that I would recommend we make some changes to, but they're more administrative. There are, dating back to when the APFO was first established, there are some dates about things like if a project was approved before 1998 and this happens and so on. We don't have any projects, so we could just strike that section of code just to clean things up. So there are a couple administrative type changes that I'm recommending that we would push forward. But I will send you the redlined version of the code, and so you all can chew on that, and then we can discuss it more at the next meeting.
Good.
Excellent.
if you'd have given that 10 minutes ago, we'd have been.
I don't know about that, but
He wanted us to talk it out.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Good stuff, Chris. Way to be. Thanks.
Sure.
Is there anything further?
I do not have anything else, no.
Okay.
The public.
Public who is not here, do they have any questions? No. So,
Make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Good evening.
Thank you.